Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
If the federal government decides to remove the legal backstop requiring us to have a consumer carbon tax in British Columbia, we will end the consumer carbon tax in British Columbia.
BC's Premier makes a major policy change on the carbon tax 5 weeks before the provincial election.
He says he's going to be campaigning against his own government's policies.
He needs to make this transparent, fair.
Plus,
we started looking into alternative plans and backup arrangements.
Air Canada passengers scramble for options as a pilot strike looms.
Starting to see cancellations start for Saturday and Sunday.
And
you'll see this place will boom.
Definitely help a lot, like students and the people using transit for sure.
The province pledges hundreds of new homes and services around the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain expansion.
I mean, you have to be able to afford it also.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. We start with a major policy reversal by BC's Premier on the carbon tax. David Eby says he would scrap the levy on consumers if the federal government lifts its legal requirement to collect it. As Katie DeRosa reports, the move has the BC Conservatives and Greens pouncing on the Premier.
That if the federal government decides to remove the legal backstop requiring us to have a consumer carbon tax in British Columbia, we will end the consumer carbon tax in British Columbia.
A bombshell announcement from Premier David Eby that few saw coming. After repeatedly defending the carbon tax, Eby now says BC would scrap it for consumers if Ottawa removes the requirement for the provinces to collect it. He says BC would still force what he calls big polluters to pay a price on carbon.
I think it's critical to also recognize that the context and the challenge for British Columbians has changed. A lot of British Columbians are struggling with affordability.
BC Conservative leader John Rustad, who vows to scrap the tax entirely if he forms government, is taking credit for Eby's sudden reversal.
Today we actually saw David Eby come out and he says he's going to be campaigning against his own government's policies. I find that quite incredible, and I guess what it comes down to is he's torn between two lovers, whether it is Jagmeet Singh or whether it is Mr. Trudeau.
Eby revealed the policy change at a rally in Vancouver alongside Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew, the only other NDP premier in Canada. Kinew has asked the federal government to exempt Manitoba from the carbon tax. BC introduced North America's first carbon tax in 2008 under the former BC Liberal government. Until now, Eby was the only Canadian premier to defend it. But the levy has become increasingly unpopular with British Columbians struggling to afford gas, groceries, and other costs. The carbon tax jumped this year from $65 to $80 per ton. Critics have said that 23% hike adds 18 cents to each liter of fuel. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh also says he no longer supports a carbon tax that hits working Canadians.
We want to see an approach to fighting the climate crisis where it doesn't put the burden on the backs of working people, where big polluters have to pay their fair share.
BC Green Party leader Sonia Furstenau says Eby is taking a step backward on addressing the climate emergency.
This is an astonishing step for this premier to take and this government to demonstrate that they don't have a real stand when it comes to climate change and carbon pollution.
Barry Penner, who introduced BC's carbon tax as Environment Minister in 2008, argues it hasn't done enough to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and has lost the support of British Columbians.
I think the provincial NDP made a mistake, a strategic error, when they moved away from the principle of revenue neutrality.
The federal government under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has made some concessions over the carbon tax, exempting the Atlantic provinces from the tax on home heating oil. He's under increasing pressure from Pierre Poilievre to scrap it entirely, and it's clear Eby, with the provincial election 5 weeks away, is feeling the pressure too. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
Passengers across the country are bracing for an Air Canada pilot strike. Earlier this week, the airline announced it was finalizing plans to halt operations amid ongoing labor negotiations. Flights could be grounded as early as this weekend. Our John Hernandez spoke with passengers preparing for the worst.
Quite a bit of stress, quite a bit of worry, a little bit of anxiety.
Ryan Schaap and his wife are supposed to fly out of Vancouver International Airport next week, a once-in-a-lifetime honeymoon trip to Asia.
We are going to explore a lot of the country in Vietnam. My wife and I are avid surfers.
They're scheduled to fly Air Canada to Singapore, but a looming airline shutdown has forced them to make some last-minute contingency plans.
We decided upon ourselves that we weren't going to put this off. We started looking into alternative plans and backup arrangements, and that's what we've done.
Air Canada pilots are prepared to strike amid ongoing labor negotiations for higher wages. The airline has announced it could start suspending operations on Sunday. If a deal isn't reached by Wednesday, the airline would shut down completely.
Air Canada makes up the largest airline in the country, so they make up the largest number of our passengers that are going to be affected by it.
This Vancouver travel agent says he has no shortage of concerned customers as the airline begins to preemptively cancel flights.
We're starting to see cancellations start for Saturday and Sunday, the 13th, 14th, and then of course on the 15th we're going to see a much larger rollback begin.
So what should you do if you're flying Air Canada in the coming days? This passenger rights advocate says sit tight and wait.
Once Air Canada cancels your flight, you have protection by the Air Passenger Protection Regulations, by the Carriage by Air Act, and you will have to be rebooked by the airline on a competitor airline if necessary.
As for Sept, he's already booked 2 refundable alternative tickets to Singapore out of San Francisco.
I don't know what type of planes, trains, and automobiles situation it could be that we could find ourselves in heading to San Francisco, but we're flying to Singapore one way or another, that's for sure.
Air Canada says customers whose flights are canceled will be rebooked or refunded. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
The BC government is promising hundreds of new homes and amenities to be built hand in hand with the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain expansion project. As Michelle Gassoub reports, it's a massive investment in one of the fastest growing cities in the country.
This stretch of Fraser Highway on 152nd will soon look very different. It's slated to be the site of one of 8 new stations along the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain project.
It's about time that housing and transportation infrastructure became one set of decision-making, one set of analysis, one priority.
The project will extend the Expo Line 16 kilometers along Fraser Highway from King George Station to 203rd Street in Langley. Now, the province has purchased 14 properties in the area, promising to build 700 homes and amenities like childcare spaces, grocery stores, and more.
When you look at the history of British Columbia, we have not seen the level of investment we are seeing in Surrey right now ever.
Surrey is the 3rd fastest growing city in Canada. Its population expanding so quickly, it's slated to be BC's largest city by the end of the decade. Faced with an influx, many residents welcome the investment.
You'll see this place will boom. Housing, population, everything. It's good for the business. And this place will be developed as, like Vancouver, So, which is really good.
It would definitely help a lot, like students and the people using transit for sure. BC needs to do a lot of more development, looking at the population growing intensively.
The province has historically been barred from buying land for the purpose of building housing, but new legislation has enabled it to purchase land near major transit hubs. Still, there are questions. The province wouldn't put a dollar amount on the cost of the affordable homes they plan to build.
You have to be able to afford it also, so you got to be looking at between $600 to $800 anyways, probably.
Building the line will cost $2 billion more than originally estimated, putting the total price tag at $6 billion.
They put it off too long. They could have had it built for a third of the price if they did it earlier.
The SkyTrain extension should be up and running by late 2029. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Surrey.
A man has now been charged after a deadly crash last year in downtown Vancouver. Police say 35-year-old Stephen Austin Tricalo has been charged with criminal negligence causing death and dangerous operation of a motor vehicle causing death, among other charges. One person was killed and 2 others seriously injured in June 2023 when a Plymouth Voyager minivan drove into the back of a Honda Accord stopped at a red light. One of the passengers in the Honda died. The VPD says Tricalo has been released from custody. Food banks in BC say this year has been its busiest year yet. For the first time ever, it saw 100,000 unique visitors in 1 month. Food Bank says it's a major concern seeing how many people are needing their help while they struggle to keep up with demand.
We're seeing an increase in the number of people who are working full-time, yet still needing to access food banks. There is a clear gap between what it costs to get by in BC and the funds available to people.
We have to work extremely hard now to just raise the funds and collect the food to be able to serve these people. It's getting very, very demanding.
Food Banks BC says housing, rent, low wages, and the cost of living are the top reasons why more people are turning to them. Harm reduction vending machines in Vancouver Island are being suspended after the Premier ordered a review of those kiosks. The machines, which give out free testing kits and drug paraphernalia, were placed at hospitals in Nanaimo, Campbell River, and Victoria last year.
To undertake an initiative to lower access to a life-saving medication like naloxone, I think is it's short-sighted, it's potentially dangerous, and should be reconsidered.
David Eby ordered the review in August after the BC Conservative candidate for Nanaimo Lanceville posted a video to social media highlighting her concerns about the machines. Harm reduction advocates say the machines helped people who use drugs to stay safe. The province says it continues to offer harm reduction supplies through peer support and service providers. A year and a half after a Dawson Creek woman was found dead at a Mexican resort, a Canadian man accused of killing her has now been found not guilty by a Mexican court. Family members of the victim, 23-year-old Kiera Agnew, and the accused both confirmed the man's acquittal. The man's mother told CBC News in a phone call that her son was flying back from Mexico to Canada today with his father and sister accompanying him. Agnew's aunt, Caitlin Levesque, said in March last year her niece was in Mexico with her boyfriend at the time of her death. They were staying in Playa del Carmen. Global Affairs Canada says it's aware of a Canadian found not guilty of murder in Mexico, but because of privacy considerations, would not say more. The BC government says it will work with Ottawa to provide free hormone replacement therapy for people experiencing menopausal symptoms.
I am very proud of the direction we've taken, of the agreement that we've signed on to today, Minister Holland and I and his government and our government, to make life better for people in British Columbia, to make life more affordable for people in British Columbia and across the country, but also, I think, to improve access to basic health care.
It's part of a pharmacare bill making its way through the House of Commons, announced back in February. It also aims to implement universal, single-payer, first-dollar coverage for a range of contraception and diabetes medications. The BC government already made contraception free here last April. So when it's too far to walk and too close to drive, another transportation option is now available for some people in this city. Lime Shared e-Scooter is now ready to go on the east side.
This partnership with Lime represents way more than just a way of getting around. It's a testament to Vancouver's leadership in green transportation and our drive to build a network that's cleaner and safer and more connected.
CIMED's Vancouver is the first city in the world with required docking stations, something that aims to prevent sidewalks and streets from getting crowded with abandoned scooters. With sales of beer slumping, many breweries have taken what was once one of the main features of the beverage out of the final product, alcohol. In Victoria, long a mecca of craft beer, breweries are jumping on the non-alcoholic bandwagon. Catherine Marlowe finds out how and why they're diving in.
BC has long prided itself in being a leader in the craft beer industry. Canada's first brew pub, for example, Spinnaker's, opened right here in Victoria in 1984. And in the past few decades, it has become increasingly common to have a microbrewery right in your neighborhood. But here's the thing. Beer drinking is on the decline. According to StatsCan, the volume of beer purchased per person dropped to an all-time low in the 2022-2023 fiscal year. So breweries are starting to expand into non-alcoholic drinks, like Phillips Brewing, for example, which has a line of non-alcoholic beers.
I think it's really shifted and changed, right, from before where there was sort of a stigma around non-alcoholic beer and it really didn't taste very good, and now we're having so many delicious non-alcoholic beer options in the market.
Now it helps that non-alcoholic beer is getting easier to make.
There's really been two pieces. One, everyone in our industry has been so busy making alcoholic beer for the last 10 years that no one's had the time to really put into developing a non-alc product. But as sort of craft beer has started to plateau a little bit, we haven't quite seen the rocket ship that it used to be. All of a sudden, we're looking into different spaces, and then that coupled with some advances in technology to actually allow us to make really good tasting non-alcoholic beer have really been the two main threads that have sort of weaved together this opportunity for us.
Now, not everyone is keeping the focus on beer. Over at Canada's first brew pub, Spinnaker's, one of the things they're trying is mocktails. Owner Paul Hadfield says it helps them keep Spinnaker's as a place where people want to gather.
Younger generations are just not drinking alcohol the way we did at all. And one of the challenges is to create cocktails that are inclusive. And everybody wants to hang out together and want to socialize, and we need to foster that.
Now, the beer makers are pretty confident that the non-alcoholic market is here to stay, but they're going to keep brewing regular beer, too. Catherine Marlowe, CBC News, Victoria.
BC's wildfire situation has eased substantially. Rain, cooler temperatures, and light winds are expected to continue to lower fire behavior in the fall.
Some rain and cooler weather in recent weeks helped the BC wildland firefighters get fires under control, but it doesn't take long for our forests to start drying out again.
There are 214 active wildfires in BC right now. More than 80% are considered held or under control. Let's go to Darius Madavi with our first look at the weather and a familiar map. Good reminder, it can dry out like that.
Yes, looks fairly similar to what we saw yesterday, Dan, but I also want to highlight, I know it feels very calm in terms of the fire situation, especially compared to last year around this time, but we have still had an above average season by a significant margin, and the fire season is not over yet, but it is winding down, so a little bit of good news. But yeah, just like we were saying at the beginning of the season, last year was an anomaly. There was virtually no way we're going to have a fire situation like last year, so things are calming down, and that's good news. But generally speaking, we are seeing some precipitation clear out of the interior, a little bit lingering in the southeast, but really just moving into Alberta at this point. Really, if we zoom into the south coast, we're starting to see some cloud build in. We're going to see that rain come to the island tomorrow. Some places, like the west coast of the island, the North Island, probably going to see that rain starting either late morning or early afternoon, or actually, no, potentially even before that. But let's take a look at our forecast, and you can see exactly what's happening. Tonight, see the cloud coming in and out of Vancouver. I know it's very blue skies right now, but that may change at times tonight. Then we have that cloud build in properly for tomorrow. We have some rain moving down the coast. We have it arriving for the North Island as well, breaking in at times, likely as showers here in Vancouver, probably late afternoon to early evening. And generally, Dan, it seems fairly calm besides that. As we get into Saturday, some more showers, a little bit of rain, and then clearer, sunnier Sunday.
Okay, we'll check in later. Thanks, Doris.
Thank you.
You may have watched Ice Age, but have you ever wondered how mammoths actually lived? SFU researcher Laura Termez is trying to answer that. She worked on a study that looked into 32 suspected mammoth fossil samples collected on Vancouver Island. The CBC's Ali Patarge met up with her to learn more.
I'm Laura Termez. I am a PhD candidate here at Simon Fraser University, and my research project is studying the Ice Age megafauna, particularly mammoths in our province.
We're in the SFU Archaeological Isotope Lab, and there are hundreds and hundreds of fossils in this building. And well, with your new study, you came to find out that the mammoths that roam BC are older than we thought. So can you tell me what you've come to discover?
Right now, we've just published our findings about the mammoths that lived on Vancouver Island. And previously, they were dated about 23,000 years ago. And our new dates from the study show that they lived there for quite some time. from 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 years ago and beyond. I think we knew it was possible that they would be that age on the island, given that sea level was lower with ice locked up, or the water locked up in the ice. But now we know for sure that they were living there at this time.
Here behind us is a fossil of a mammoth tusk. It's about a little more than 2 feet.
That's right.
And it looks very heavy. Can I
yeah,
I try
we can
it?
try lifting it together. It's
Okay.
quite heavy.
Let's see.
And it's only part of a tusk
Okay.
too.
Oh gosh! No. Okay. I'm not going to try anymore, but from the onset, it looks like any other tree bark, right? But if you look closer, it's actually an animal.
That's right. Yeah, it can be very, very confusing to know what a tusk looks like versus a piece of a tree trunk. This one is local. It's found in Chilliwack area, and it was the first mammoth that was dated at SFU. Back when SFU had its own radiocarbon dating lab, quite a number of decades ago. And they learned that this mammoth lived in the Chilliwack Valley on a grassy floodplain about 25,000 years ago.
And can you tell me about the process of studying a sample like this? I see you have tubes right next to you there.
So the first thing we like to do is try to pick a sample that won't impact it too much. So something like this that's already disconnected from the rest of it, so it can still be used for display purposes like in a museum. And then we take a size about a sugar cube, and then what we do is we cut it up into little pieces and then put it in a test tube where it can dissolve into an acid. And then once it's nice and dissolved, it goes through a variety of lab processes, and then hopefully it gets turned into a fluffy, foamy, kind of whitish material, which then we can understand how well preserved, say, this tusk is.
Just by looking at this, obviously these mammoths were giant creatures back in the day. So can you tell me about how they existed in the ancient ecosystem of BC back then?
For this individual, they did pollen analysis based off this dirt that's adhering, you can see in different areas of the tusk, and found that it lived in a floodplain that had grasses and sedges, and maybe some pine and spruce around. But mammoths, being so big, they were really good at trampling saplings down to increase the grasslands for their own feeding behaviors. So it's probably very much an open parkland that they roamed in the Chilliwack Valley.
So Laura, right now we are amidst SFU's collection of fossils. I see a lot of them. They're really used. Tell me about the samples you have here.
Right. So we're in the SFU Zoo Archaeology Lab, and we have lots of skeletal remains spanning from the Pleistocene. We have really old bison, and then here we have some modern whale. So lots of different animals. I love all kinds of bones, paleontology, archaeology. I always loved the natural world, and I just wanted to learn more about it. So I got into the study of bones. I think we're all fascinated about what the world was like before we lived here. And so I've been receiving phone calls and emails from people around the province telling me the different mammoths they found. We were just talking about that Chilliwack tusk, and a fellow emailed me about a tusk that was found in the greater Vancouver area. So it's nice to learn about the local ones hanging out here. We're just going to expand the same study on Vancouver Island, but expand it to the rest of the province. So look at these Ice Age animals, where they were living and at what time period for the rest of our province.
As the provincial election approaches, the poison drug crisis is top of mind. Why some are calling for involuntary drug treatment and the issues that brings after the break. drug treatment has long been a challenge for many drug users in BC. The BC Conservative Party says it will use involuntary treatment to care for people suffering from severe addictions if it wins the fall provincial election. More than 4 decades ago, though, involuntary care was already being discussed in provincial politics when a heroin treatment centre opened on Vancouver Island. Then BC Health Minister Bob McClelland criticized the federal government for refusing to help BC deal with what he called a national problem.
It is Canada's problem, and British Columbia will stand by no longer and allow it to continue to spread through our society while others say to us that it is a problem that either has no solution or is too difficult to solve.
The new Brannan Lake Detention Centre will handle the hardcore of British Columbia's estimated 8,000 heroin users. They'll be sent here for up to 6 months' treatment that begins with withdrawal from heroin use, eased by the administration of methadone. The program's being phased in, with addicts invited to turn themselves in, but only a handful have so far come forward.
What do you think of the chances of your kicking the habit here?
I think it's really good because I want to kick, but I don't know about the compulsory treatment yet. Most people I know don't want to kick.
Very soon, anyone held to be a drug user will be sent to Brannan Lake or ordered to take treatment at an outpatient clinic. Extended psychiatric counseling and teaching of job skills will try and equip addicts with a new lifestyle, free from drugs. The program looks for a 70% success rate. The legal profession remains nervous. The Medical Association has agreed to cooperate, but doctors specializing in drug problems still say experience in other countries suggests results will never justify the means used here.
You cannot see in our system withdrawal of rights, particularly if you cannot guarantee, and by guarantee I mean 80% or better results. And this is an experimental program. It's not a guaranteed program even at this point.
There's one further barrier to the full-scale roundup of drug addicts, which is due to begin on July the 1st, a challenge in the courts, which the Civil Liberties Association will launch later this month. Colin Holt, CBC News at Brannan Lake on Vancouver Island.
Joining us for more is Tyson Singh Kelsola, PhD candidate in SFU's Faculty of Health Sciences and a downtown east side-based outreach worker. Tyson, we appreciate you being here. How much does involuntary opioid addiction care work?
It doesn't work, really. Currently, we only have forced treatment under the Mental Health Act. It's not meant to be used as a tool for apprehending and forcing people who use drugs into treatment, although it is used in that way sometimes. And from the research that has been done in the city, there is no significant statistical difference in use patterns amongst people who attend and who do not.
Just to give us a sense of how deep does that research go? How recent and how many people did it involve, do you know?
I'm not sure the exact number of people that were involved in the research, but it was, linked to hospital data. It was based on people's experiences going into forced treatment. But what we do have a better idea of in BC is experiences under the Mental Health Act, which is the tool that's used most to apprehend people and force them into treatment, force them into psych wards. And we know that people's experiences are not good. And we know from a recent ombudsperson report that the Mental Health Act, its use is not often within what it says on paper. It's often weaponized against people, and people's rights-based paperwork are not filled out. And I think that is very similar to, the clip you just played ended with the line around rounding up drug users in the BC or the Civil Liberties Association wanting to challenge that. And, David Eby, the former head of the BCCLA, now having a very different tune than being in support of people's civil liberties in this situation.
And certainly he's sitting in a different chair as the premier, and I respect that point. We did hear from somebody in that story from 1979 who did go, but said, I don't know about the compulsory component. To that end, though, what responsibility do healthcare providers and others have to people who would not voluntarily get treatment and are a danger to themselves and perhaps others?
Yeah, Dan, thanks for the question. I think that's really valuable. And I think before we even start talking about involuntary treatment or forced care that is not effective and does not help people and is an extremely traumatic experience, which actually drives people away from the healthcare system, we need to ask, if we're starting something new, if we're doing a new policy, if we're building new facilities, why don't we start with something that people actually want, that we benefit from? There are no facilities for involuntary care. Our psych wards are full. People are being sent to them under the Mental Health Act and being discharged in less than a day. And so these policies that are being suggested by both John Rustad and David Eby, I think, are really distractions, from the healthcare crises that are occurring in our province.
If I can, then what would you suggest as an alternative? What would you like to see outside of involuntary care that will have people who are living with an opioid or a drug addiction say, I want to go there, I want to get into that program?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, the drug supply has never been more contaminated. Fentanyl overtook the heroin supply in the street almost a decade ago, and now we're seeing benzos and sedatives in the drug supply. And, benzos are one of the most difficult drugs to stop using. We need a regulated drug supply because quitting, a fentanyl habit and a benzo one is next to impossible. And it's also made recovery and treatment-based programs extremely, much more dangerous than they used to be, because discharge and lower tolerance come with so many risk factors. So we need to start by regulating the drug supply and making treatment safer. I'm just one of many, many people calling for basic human right to be met in this province. We have an 18,000 person BC housing waitlist just in Metro Vancouver. The welfare rate is as low as $600 for some people still, the cost of rent has fast eclipsed that. And the drug supply, again, is extremely toxic. So we need to start with interventions that people would actually benefit from before we even entertain this conversation of handcuffing people and forcibly injecting them.
Tyson Singh Kelsall, PhD candidate at SFU. We appreciate your time and your perspective. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dan.
Amid growing concerns, Air Canada pilots could soon be on strike. Communities in Eastern Canada are sounding the alarm. That's next. The ongoing contract dispute between Air Canada and its pilots union threatens to disrupt travel plans for many people this weekend. It could upend thousands of business trips, vacations, and cargo shipments. And as Peter Cowan reports, businesses on the East Coast that depend on tourism are already feeling the impact.
Most people arriving on the island of Newfoundland do so by air, and the majority fly Air Canada. But now, even before starting their vacation, visitors aren't sure how it'll end.
It's quite worrisome because I'm here and how will I get back? It's a little far to walk.
The union representing pilots can issue a 72-hour strike notice as of Sunday. A lockout notice is also possible. Air Canada says it'll have to start winding down flights in anticipation as early as Friday. A strike would ground all flights by Wednesday. Already, pilots have set up a strike headquarters in Toronto. Wages remain one of the big issues. The pilots are looking for a big increase to close the gap with their American counterparts.
I'm cautiously optimistic. The last week or so seems to have been productive at the negotiating table. As you can see here, we're ready for any eventuality.
But Air Canada is warning the federal government may need to step in if a deal isn't reached.
We have accepted changes to over 70% of the collective bargaining agreement, but we are now faced with unreasonable wage demands that unfortunately we cannot meet.
The tourism industry is also on edge and putting pressure on government.
A labor disruption in air travel won't just leave people stranded, it will ripple through the economy, hitting small business owners who are already struggling to make it.
The best deals happen at the bargaining table.
The federal government is still hoping this will be resolved through negotiation, not arbitration, but some travelers aren't waiting to find out. Back in Newfoundland, hotels are getting an increase in cancellations.
We're not going to be able to get the opportunity to make up this business, so and for many of us, it's the profit.
Air Canada is letting passengers rebook their flights for free. Adding any cancellations by the airline will result in a refund. Peter Cowan, CBC News, St. John's.
The family of a sick man in Ontario is demanding answers after hospital staff shaved off his facial hair. As Dale Manuktuk tells us, it was done without his consent or that of his relatives and in violation of the man's religious beliefs.
I'm just still trying to figure out when he wakes up, if they put a mirror in front of him, how he's going to react to, hey, what happened here?
Jashtid Dhaliwal is the son-in-law of 85-year-old Jaginder Singh Kalair, who in late July fell down the stairs.
Any bone that we could think of was damaged in his body, right? And obviously, he had internal bleeding in his head, so he was not conscious.
Kalair was taken to St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, where he was treated for a month and then transferred to Brampton Civic, closer to his family. 2 weeks ago, the hospital asked permission to shave his facial hair, to which the family said no. The next day, Kalair was clean shaven.
They even asked the doctor, they said, you know, hey, why was he shaven clean? The doctor, he basically said that, hey, you know, that's not his department, that's up to the nurses. So he brushed it off.
Sick men never shave their facial hair as part of their faith.
This is a very serious cultural violation. This is not just ethics, it's the law. If you don't have consent, you cannot do anything. The Canada Health Act is very clear in this country. You must have consent for absolutely everything.
William Osler Health System, which operates Brampton Civic, would not comment on an individual case due to patient privacy. In a statement, the hospital says, in part, we are sorry and deeply concerned when we do not meet the standard our patients and their families expect and deserve. Also respects the religious rights and freedoms of all Canadians.
They could have sent us that a week ago. I never would have called the lawyer.
The family contacted the World Sick Organization. Its president issued a statement writing, given that Brampton is home to the largest Sikh population in Canada, it is inconceivable that such disregard for Sikh faith practices could occur at Brampton Civic Hospital. William Osler tells CBC Toronto it's investigating and conducting a comprehensive review of this case. Dale Manuktuk, CBC News, Caledon.
The federal Liberal government could soon lose a crucial ally in efforts involving gun control. It's a nonprofit group founded by survivors of the 1989 École Polytechnique massacre. It says the existing federal gun buyback program does not go far enough and is a waste of taxpayer money. More now from Danielle LeBlanc.
Nathalie Provost is losing faith in Ottawa's gun control agenda.
We need to have a structured and efficient buyback program, and we don't see it in operation right now.
Like other survivors of the Polytechnic massacre in 1989, she has spent much of her life fighting to ban military-style weapons in Canada.
Our first request was a complete ban on assault-style weapon. And for us, that meant that no more assault-style weapon would be in circulation.
The Trudeau Liberals had promised to make that dream a reality. In 2020, the government banned 1,500 models of firearms, promising to buy them back from retailers or individual gun owners and destroy them.
So today, we take another big step forward.
While Ottawa has banned the likes of AR-15s, Police Se Souvient and gun experts agree many similar firearms are still available, including ones like the Crypto that is just entering the market.
In 2020, they banned AR-15, but they didn't ban the WK-180 because it was only in small numbers on the market then.
Wes Winkle owns a hunting shop.
Taxpayers should be so upset at this process. And those consumers that are licensed are going to take that same funds, turn around and buy the identical firearm with a different branded make and model.
Public Safety Minister Dominique Leblanc refuses to be swayed by critics.
On va aller acheter ces armes à feu et on va les détruire.
He said Ottawa will recover and start destroying firearms this fall and into next year. Provost says she's not sure the Prime Minister will be welcome at the next commemoration of the Polytechnic massacre on December 6th in Montreal.
We have to do this buyback program, but if we do it, we have to do it efficiently, not just for appearance.
The sharp criticism comes at a perilous time for the Liberals, especially among voters in big cities like Montreal, where there is a crucial by-election on Monday. Daniel Leblanc, CBC News, Ottawa.
Imagine swimming a long body of water. After the break, you'll meet an ultra-marathoner who took on Lake Okanagan. Stick around. Last summer, an ultra-endurance athlete living in Kelowna successfully swam the length of Okanagan Lake. The feat is now the subject of a documentary out this month. During the 106-kilometer swim, Nick Pelletier didn't take any breaks for sleep. He had a 20-person support team with him and 2 motorized boats and some kayaks to monitor his progress and hand him food and drinks. He shared more about the swim with On the host Gloria Makarenko.
If you look at it like a 106-kilometer swim, then it's a really big undertaking, but you have to kind of take it 1 kilometer at a time, 106 times. So focus right what's in front of you. That's all you have to control. What already is done, it doesn't matter. What's coming up doesn't matter unless you get through the kilometer you're on. In swimming, you're out there. You have to have people to help feed you. You have to have people to help keep you on track navigational wise and make sure you're safe if something does arise. So yeah, the crew is huge importance when things could get dire out there, and you need somebody to trust you and believe in you even when things seem kind of humanly impossible. So.
Do you have any like, gee, if I were to do it again, I would have done this differently? Anything like that?
No, I won't be doing this one again for sure. I'm moving on to other things. But like I said, yeah, I think experience is a great teacher, but really when you sit back and reflect on the experience is where you get the lessons from it. So I've taken a lot of time to reflect on this experience, and it's actually already helped me in some future endeavors I've done and will be continuing to do.
That's a big lake, Darius.
106
You were just on it.
kilometers? Yeah. I was. I would go back for another swim, but I would not swim across it.
It's hard enough driving the length of it. The best place there is right on the water with snacks and a beverage, just like he had. Just sitting there.
Yeah. I'm sure it's the same.
Yeah, exactly the same.
Right. If you want to should we find a good time this weekend to go in Okanagan?
Let's do it.
Dan?
Why not?
Let's
we'll dive right in.
All right. So we've got this weak ridging that's bringing us a little bit of a break in the clouds and the rain, but not going to last too long. We're going to have another trough move in, especially down through the island, bringing some rain to the island tomorrow, also bringing us some showers towards the end of the day in the afternoon, evening time. Then that's going to spread into the interior as well, so expect some showers there too. Then another very weak ridge builds in. We've got a little bit of a break again for sunshine and warmer weather, slightly warmer, a couple degrees, but not so rainy for the southern part of the province, at least as we get into Sunday and Monday, end of the day Sunday. And then another trough builds in, this time quite deep, and so we're going to see quite a bit of rain. Now, what does that all translate to on the rain map? Well, a lot of rain at times. Tomorrow, we're going to see that break into the island first and then make its way down to Vancouver. Then we're going to see, again, those showers coming in and out throughout the day Saturday. And then as it comes to, starts to clear out a little bit, we see that cloud clear. And then you can see the hint of it up there in the northwest. That next system rolls down on Tuesday, especially bringing us some very decent rainfall. We don't get to see that just yet, but a little teaser for what's coming as we get into early next week. Now, temperatures are going to stay fairly seasonal, but a big drop on Saturday, especially in the southern interior, but a 5-degree drop there. If we take a look at our conditions for tomorrow, still a decent amount of sunshine in the interior, but lots of cloud and rain as well, especially if you're on the island. Expect quite a bit of rain, and that's the story here in Vancouver as well, Dan. We've got a few showery days ahead, but then some sun.
There you go. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Up next, after years of development, 2 SpaceX crew members stepped out into the void hundreds of miles above Earth for the first ever private spacewalk. Stick around.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox.
On October 5th, join CBC guest host Michelle Elliott at the annual Big Sisters Soiree Gala, celebrating Big Sisters and helping to inspire and empower the next generation of girls and gender-diverse youth. Tickets at bigsisters.bc.ca. And join CBC at the Alumni UBC's Transforming Our Health with AI webinar, October 8th. A panel of experts discuss AI research and its impact on the future of healthcare.
In some ways, today was both a giant leap and several small but significant steps in space travel.
CBC's Nicole Mortellero now on the privately funded mission taking place high above the Earth.
SpaceX, back at home we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
It was the view of a lifetime as billionaire and philanthropist Jared Isaacman popped his head out of the SpaceX Dragon capsule. He was greeted by a stunning sight, the blue marble, Earth. Shortly after his 10-minute spacewalk, it was SpaceX engineer Sarah Gillis's turn.
That's awesome.
While only Isaacman and Gillis exited the capsule, 2 other crew members were sitting inside, also exposed to the vacuum of space. This was more than just a chance to view Earth at its finest. It was a test of SpaceX's new spacesuits. This, the first real-world test.
10 or 15 years from now, people will be starting to settle the south pole of the moon, and they'll be wearing the Mark V version of this spacesuit and just counting on it to work perfectly. And it's largely because of what we witnessed today.
This crewed mission has seen many milestones, including traveling the farthest from Earth since the last Apollo mission in 1972. The International Space Station is a mere 400 kilometers above Earth. The 4 astronauts traveled 1,000 kilometers further, beyond the Van Allen belt, an area that shields us from harmful space radiation, and then heading down to 700 kilometers to perform the highest spacewalk ever.
A lot of what we learned during the spacewalk today about how the human body is affected by radiation in high orbits is going to go into how they prepare that vehicle to make sure that NASA and other astronauts are safe going to the moon.
But it's not just about going to the moon. Mars is the ultimate goal.
This is a pretty amazing step, an amazing time to be alive.
Nicole Mortellero, CBC News, Toronto.
Cool. Would you do that?
Absolutely.
Same here.
First newscast from space.
Oh, perfect. This just out of the capsule.
Oh, I've said it before and I say it again. The ISS needs somebody doing fun facts up there. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And Janella Hamilton will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. So please join her then. Good night.